1992. Dale Hoffman sat behind the wheel of his Peterbilt, 18-wheeler loaded, bound for Dallas. He pulled out of the Texaco lot and into the darkness of the highway. By the time the surface grew calm, both Dale Hoffman and his truck were gone, vanished into the deep. 20 minutes later, he vanished. No crash, no wreckage, no body. But when the quarry drained and divers reached the bottom, the truth surfaced with him.
What really happened that night? Was it just an accident or a carefully planned crime?
We're about to uncover the truth together, here on Vanished Stories. Like this video and subscribe if you haven't yet. Take your coffee with milk, relax, and listen carefully, because what really happened is about to unfold.
The autumn of 1992 held a deceptive calm, a prelude to a storm no one saw coming. Dale Hoffman, a man forged from the asphalt and endless highways, sat in the rumbling sanctuary of his Peterbilt. The engine idled, a low growl against the hushed backdrop of the Texaco off Route 287. Machine parts, the mundane cargo of an ordinary night, awaited their journey to Dallas. 20 minutes later, Dale climbed back into the cab, the diesel heart of his rig throbbing beneath him. He pulled out of the lot, a silhouette against the fading light, and then, as if swallowed by the vast Texas night, he vanished. No screech of tires, no mangled wreckage, no shattered glass, just absence. A gaping void where a man and his truck had been. The search was relentless, a desperate ballet of flashing lights and concerned whispers, yet it yielded nothing. 8 months later, the insurance company, resigned to the impenetrable mystery, paid out a sum of $700,000. Linda, Dale's wife, was handed a cold, clinical explanation. He'd likely run off to embrace a new life, a new identity. Small-town gossip, a venomous current, hinted at another woman, a fleeting affair in Amarillo that had become a convenient narrative. Emma, Dale's daughter, grew up under the heavy cloak of abandonment, a shadow that stretched across her childhood and hardened her young heart. 20 years peeled away, each year a layer of dust on a forgotten truth. Then, in October 2012, the Garrison Quarry, long dormant, began to surrender its secrets. Industrial expansion demanded its drainage, and 30 feet down in the murky depths, construction crews made a discovery that would rip open old wounds. A 1987 Peterbilt, perfectly preserved in the airless embrace of the water, emerged from its watery tomb. Dale Hoffman was still there, a silent sentinel, strapped into the driver's seat.
The medical examiner, a meticulous artist of the macabre, almost missed it. A small-caliber bullet hole, discreetly placed at the back of the skull, lay hidden beneath 2 decades of silt and forgotten time. But it was a crumpled receipt in Dale's jacket that truly shattered the carefully constructed facade of his disappearance. 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches. Time-stamped 11:47 p.m. Dale never bought 2 of anything. Someone else had been in that truck. Someone who knew the quarry hadn't been used since 1978. Someone who had waited, patient as the water, for their perfect crime to surface. Emma Hoffman was immersed in the vibrant hues of paint samples at Morrison's Hardware when her phone, an alien presence in her hands, jangled. An unknown number, a local area code. She almost dismissed it, another relentless sales call, but a flicker of intuition, a primal urge, compelled her thumb to hit accept. Emma Hoffman speaking? "This is Sheriff Tom Garrett. I need you to sit down." A sharp, brittle laugh escaped her lips. "I'm at work. We found your father." The paint samples, a vibrant cascade of cerulean blue, desert sand, and rust red, slipped from her grasp, fanning across the linoleum like a scattered deck of playing cards. 20 years. 20 years of practicing indifference, of learning to utter the phrase, "My father left when I was 8, without a tremor. 20 years of carefully constructed emotional walls, crumbled in 4 brutal words. "That's not possible." "His truck was in Garrison Quarry, the one they're draining for the new industrial." "No." The word, flat and absolute, tore from her throat. "My father drove away, November 8th, 1992. He left us." "Ma'am, I need you to come to the medical examiner's office." "Your mother? Is Linda Brennan still your mother?" "Linda Hayes, now. She remarried." Emma's legs felt like jelly, betraying her. She sank onto a paint can, the cold metal a stark anchor. "You're wrong. He left. The insurance company said, 'Please come to the county building. Your mother's already on her way.'"
Emma drove the 12 miles on autopilot, her mind a maelstrom of disbelief and a burgeoning, terrifying hope. The county building, a stoic sentinel of brown brick and small, watchful windows, squatted on Main Street, unchanged by the passage of time. She'd been here once before, the rebellious 16-year-old, a drunk driving charge skillfully whittled down to reckless operation. A different sheriff then. Old Man Garrett had been a deputy, the one who'd meticulously worked her father's case. The medical examiner's office, a subterranean lair, hummed with the sterile drone of fluorescent lights. The air, thick with the cloying scent of industrial disinfectant, fought a losing battle against something far more profound, far more unsettling. Her mother, Linda, a ghost of her former self, sat in a hard plastic chair, still clad in her Walmart vest. Linda Hayes, at 52, bore little resemblance to the vibrant Linda Hoffman of 32. The woman who had once clung to the phone for 3 agonizing months had been replaced by someone who had learned not to wait for anything, whose hope had been painstakingly extinguished. "Mom." Linda looked up, her face a canvas of confusion, not sorrow. "They're saying it's Dale. It can't be." Sheriff Garrett emerged from a side door, a shadow of the eager young deputy Emma remembered. Older now, his belly straining against the confines of his uniform, but the quiet intensity in his eyes was familiar. "Mrs. Hayes, Miss Hoffman, thank you for coming." "How do you know it's him?" Emma heard her own voice, thin and reedy, a stranger's voice.
Dental records match, VIN number on the truck matches. His wallet was in his pocket. Garrett sat across from them, his hands folded, a gesture of solemnity. The truck was 30 feet down, perfectly preserved in the quarry water. Airless environment prevented decomposition of most materials. "I don't understand." Linda's voice was a whisper, a breath of a sound. "He left us. The insurance investigator said he probably went to Mexico. There was that woman in Amarillo. There was never any woman in Amarillo, Emma snapped, the accumulated rage of 2 decades of defending him even when she hated him for leaving, finally erupting. That was just gossip. The medical examiner found something. Garrett pulled out a folder, its contents a harbinger of untold grief. This is going to be difficult to hear. Emma's chest tightened, a vice-like grip stealing her breath. Your father didn't leave. He was murdered. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, or perhaps it was just the frantic thrumming in Emma's head. Small caliber gunshot wound to the back of the skull, likely a .22. The angle suggests he was sitting when shot. He was dead before the truck entered the water. Linda's made a sound, a strangled noise, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. But the insurance money, they said he ran off. We had to use it for the house, for Emma's college. The case is being reopened as a homicide. Emma stood, sat, then stood again, a restless energy coursing through her. I need to see him. That's not advisable. 20 years underwater. I need to see him. Garrett looked at Linda, who nodded slowly, a silent agreement born of shared grief. He led them down a hallway, each step deepening the chill that permeated the air. The morgue door, a formidable slab of heavy steel, groaned open. Inside, a tableau of stainless steel and white tile. 3 tables, 1 occupied, shrouded by a blue sheet. The medical examiner, a young woman who looked as if she'd just emerged from medical school, offered a sympathetic glance. Family. His wife, daughter. She pulled back the sheet partially, revealing only the face. Emma had braced herself for horror, for the grotesque decay of decomposition, for the stark image of a skull. But the cold water had wrought a strange preservation, a mummification that rendered him recognizable. His face, a tapestry of leather and bone, still bore the stubborn mustache he'd refused to shave despite her mother's pleas. The scar on his chin, a faded relic of a loading dock accident. That's Dale, Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. Emma touched the cold metal edge of the table. Real. This was real. Her father hadn't chosen to leave, hadn't chosen freedom over family. Someone had ripped that choice from him. There's something else, the medical examiner said, holding up an evidence bag. Inside, a receipt, laminated by time and water, a ghost of a transaction. This was in his shirt pocket, from the Texaco on Route 287, November 8th, 11:47 p.m. Emma could discern the faded print through the plastic. 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, $8.47. She spoke automatically, a reflex born of forgotten memories. Dad never ate 2 sandwiches. That's what we need to discuss, Sheriff Garrett said. Someone was with him that night. Someone who was supposed to be on that run, but called in sick at the last minute. His business partner, Carl Briggs. The name struck Emma with the force of cold water. Uncle Carl. The man who had brought Christmas presents after Dad left. Who had helped Mom navigate the labyrinthine insurance paperwork. Uncle Carl, who had sold the trucking business 5 years later and retired to his serene lake house on Lake Buchanan. Carl said Dale was depressed, Linda recalled slowly, her voice laced with a newfound suspicion. Said he'd been talking about starting over,
Carl's the one who suggested I filed for the insurance. We'll need to ask him some questions, Garrett said carefully. Emma looked back at her father's face, a silent accusation in his mummified features. 20 years underwater. 20 years of missed birthdays, graduations, Christmases, her own wedding, all under the false pretense that he had chosen to miss them. The grief she'd processed, the anger she'd painstakingly worked through in therapy, the acceptance she'd finally found, all of it built upon a foundation of lies. "The truck," she said suddenly. "Can I see the truck?" "It's at the impound lot. I want to see it." The impound lot, a desolate expanse behind the sheriff's station, held Dale's Peterbilt like a forgotten relic. Water still wept from its undercarriage, and algae, a verdant shroud, clung to it like fur. The chrome, once gleaming, was tarnished beyond salvation. Yet it was undeniably his truck, the familiar dent in the front bumper, a testament to Emma's childhood mishap with her bike. The Georgia Bulldog sticker, a faded emblem of loyalty, still adorned the window. Garrett opened the driver's door, and the cab exhaled 2 decades of lake water and suffocating silence. Emma's school photo, an 8-year-old grin missing her front teeth, was still taped to the dashboard, protected by plastic, the photo he'd looked at every day on his runs. "He kept it," she whispered, a fragile breath of hope.
There's more. Garrett pointed to the sleeping compartment behind the seats. His overnight bag, meticulously packed for a 3-day run, remained closed. Nothing was missing, save for his logbook. He always kept his logbook. Exactly. But here's the interesting thing. Garrett pulled out another evidence bag, another Texaco receipt. This was wedged under the passenger seat. Same night, same location, but a different time. 10:15 p.m. 1 coffee, 1 sandwich, paid credit card. Carl Briggs. Emma stared at the receipt, the implications chilling her to the bone. Carl was there. Appears so, but he told investigators he was homesick that night. His wife confirmed it. His wife would confirm anything, Carl said. Linda's voice had hardened, the softness replaced by a steely resolve. Dolores never questioned anything. Emma touched the truck's door, rust flaking under her fingers, a tangible representation of decay and deception. He didn't leave us. No, he didn't. Then who's been living with this for 20 years? Who looked me in the eye at my high school graduation and said Dad would be proud? Who came to my wedding and said it was a shame Dad couldn't walk me down the aisle? Garrett offered no answer. None was needed. Emma's gaze drifted back to the photo on the dashboard, protected all these years in its plastic sleeve, waiting at the bottom of a quarry. Her father had been down there, looking at her 8-year-old face, while she grew up hating him. "I want to help," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "Whatever you need, I want to help catch who did this." "Emma," Linda began, a note of apprehension in her voice. "No, Mom, 20 years. Whoever did this has been walking around for 20 years while Dad was down there. While we thought—" Her voice cracked, betraying the raw emotion. "I wrote him a letter when I was 12, told him I hated him, mailed it to every Dale Hoffman in Texas." The sun, a fiery orb, dipped below the impound lot fence, casting long, dark shadows from the truck. "We'll get them," Garrett vowed, his voice a low rumble. "Whoever did this, we'll get them." Emma nodded, but her thoughts were consumed by Carl Briggs, by his deceptive smile at her wedding,
by the hollow platitude that her father would be proud, by the convenient sale of the trucking business and his early retirement, by the insurance money that had funded her college education, blood money, all of it. Sleep, a distant shore, eluded Emma. 3 days since her father's truck had been salvaged from the quarry, and the receipt, with its damning 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, was seared into her mind. At 3 a.m., she sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, a digital archaeologist sifting through old newspaper archives. Twin Pines Trucking announces new routes, June 1992. Local business sees record growth, August 1992. Then, after November, a chilling silence. No announcement of Dale Hoffman's disappearance. Only a small, innocuous item in January 1993 announcing Carl Briggs's takeover of operations. Her phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion into the stillness of the night. Wayne, her father's brother. "You awake?" "Yeah. Can I come over?" Wayne, at 53, carried the weight of 2 decades etched into his face, the grooves a testament to his unwavering defense of his brother's memory. He stood in Emma's doorway, a cardboard box clutched in his hands. "Couldn't sleep either," he said, his voice raspy. "Keep thinking about what I should have seen." Emma made coffee, its aroma a brief comfort. Wayne set the box on the table. "What's this?" "Everything I kept from Dale's. Your mom threw most of it out, but I grabbed what I could." He pulled out a trucker's logbook. Not her father's final missing one, but a meticulously kept record from October 1992. "Look at this. Dale's handwriting, neat and careful, documented routes, times, mileage, the mundane details of a trucker's life. But in the margins, different notes emerged from the past. Carl short again, covered his fuel. Turn to October 15th. Emma found it. Carl asked about life insurance today. Weird question now. October 22nd. Carl's gambling again. Dolores called looking for him, told her he was on a run. Emma's hands tightened on the logbook, the paper a fragile connection to a buried truth. He was covering for him. "Your dad was too loyal. Always had been. We started Twin Pines together, all 3 of us, back in '85. But Carl never could handle money." Wayne pulled out a manila folder, its contents a testament to his own quiet investigation. "I did some digging after Dale disappeared. Found these photocopies of receipts from a truck stop casino in Oklahoma. Carl's signature. Thousands of dollars." "How?" "Buddy of mine worked there. Carl owed money to the wrong people. The kind who break fingers first, ask questions later." "Did you tell the police?" "Tried to. They said Dale probably had debts too. Said he ran off to escape them." I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Dale never gambled a day in his life. Wouldn't even buy lottery tickets. Emma's phone rang. "Sheriff Garrett, we need you to come in. Both you and Wayne. If he's there, I can hear him breathing." They drove separately to the station, the dawn painting the sky in hues of rust and bruised purple. The sheriff's office was already a hive of activity, deputies moving with a quiet purpose. Garrett led them to an interview room. A laptop sat on the table, its screen a glowing portal to a hidden past. "We pulled this from the truck's sleeping compartment. It was in a waterproof case. Truckers used them for paperwork. Still worked after we dried it out." He turned the screen toward them. "Your father kept records, detailed ones. Spreadsheets, delivery logs, payment records, and a folder labeled Carl." "Jesus," Wayne breathed, the word a prayer. Inside, scanned IOUs, Dozens of them. Carl Briggs owed Twin Pines Trucking $47,000. The last one was dated November 1st, 1992. There's more. Garrett clicked another file. Insurance papers. Dale had a $500,000 life insurance policy, standard for truckers. But look at the beneficiary change form. November 5th, 1992, 3 days before Dale died. The beneficiary had been changed from Linda Hoffman to Twin Pines Trucking, LLC. "That's not Dad's signature," Emma said immediately. "Look at the H in Hoffman. Dad made his H's different, 2 separate lines. This is forged." We noticed. We also pulled Carl's financial records from 1992. November 15th, 7 days after Dale disappeared, Carl deposited $8,000 cash. Said it was from a cargo bonus, but the company that supposedly paid it doesn't exist. "Where is Carl now?" Wayne asked, his voice low, dangerous. "Lake House. Retired there in '98 after selling the trucking business. We're heading there this afternoon." "I want to come," Emma said, her resolve unwavering. "That's not—" "Please, I need to see his face when you ask him." Garrett studied her, then relented. "You can observe from the car, that's all."
The drive to Lake Buchanan unfolded over 2 hours, a landscape of rolling hills, scrub brush, and cedar, the same terrain her father had traversed countless times. Emma followed the sheriff's cruiser, Wayne a silent, simmering presence beside her. Carl's lake house, an ostentatious display of glass and stone, sat on a prime lot, a new boat bobbing gently at its private dock. Money. Everywhere. 20 years of spending what he'd taken. Emma parked where Garrett indicated, far enough back to be discreet, yet with a clear view. She watched as the sheriff and 2 deputies approached the front door. Carl answered, older, heavier, but undeniably the same Uncle Carl who had taught her to fish, his smile a practiced mask of geniality. He shook Garrett's hand, playing the part of the friendly retiree. Then, Garrett must have revealed the true purpose of their visit. Carl's body stiffened, his smile faltered. He stepped back, shook his head, a gesture of bewildered innocence, and gestured vaguely toward the lake. "He's going to run," Wayne muttered. But Carl didn't run. He invited them in. The door closed, swallowing them whole. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Emma's phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer that," Wayne warned. But she did. Emma. Dolores Briggs. Carl's wife. Her voice, rough from decades of cigarettes, rasped with a fragile hope. "Is it true about your father? They found him in the quarry?" Silence. Then, "I knew. God help me, I knew something was wrong. Carl came home that night, covered in mud. Said he'd had to change a tire, but Dale's truck didn't have a flat when they found it, did it?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "Dolores, I'm at my sister's in Austin. Been here since yesterday when the sheriff called. I'm not going back. 40 years of marriage, and I'm done lying for him." "What happened that night?" "Carl left at 9. Said he was meeting Dale about selling his share of the business. Came back at 3 in the morning. Shirt had blood on it, just a little on the sleeve. I washed it. God forgive me, I washed it." "Will you testify?" A long pause. "Yes. Your father was a good man. He deserved better than what Carl gave him. Better than what we all gave him." The line went dead. The front door of the lake house opened, and Carl emerged, his hands encased in handcuffs. Garrett followed, his expression grim. Even from 50 yards away, Emma could see Carl's eyes scanning, searching. They found her car, found her watching. He smiled, the same unsettling smile from her graduation, her wedding, as if proud of her. Wayne's hand clenched on her arm. "Don't!" But Emma was already out of the car, walking toward them, a force of nature driven by 2 decades of unspoken rage. Carl watched her approach, that unsettling smile never wavering. "Emma, honey, don't." Her voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the silence. "Don't you dare." "Your father would be proud of you," Carl said. "He always talked about you, every run, showing that picture, telling everyone about his little girl. You killed him." "I tried to save him. The business was failing, the debts. You don't understand what they would have done to me, to all of us." "So you shot him?" Carl's smile finally faded, replaced by a flicker of resentment. "He wouldn't take the money. Said he'd rather lose everything honest than steal from the insurance company. Stubborn fool. I offered him half to disappear, more than half. He could have started over, sent for you later. He would never have left us." "No," Carl agreed, the admission heavy with irony. "That was the problem. Dale always did the right thing, even when it was the stupid thing." Garrett guided Carl toward the cruiser, but Carl's voice, now devoid of its forced charm, carried across the gravel drive. "I helped you, paid for your college with that insurance money, walked you down the aisle when you got married. I was there, Emma." "Where was he?" "He was at the bottom of Garrison Quarry, where you put him." Carl stopped walking, and for a fleeting moment his mask slipped completely. "He made me do it. If he'd just taken the money—" "Get him out of here," Emma said to Garrett, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. They drove Carl away, leaving Emma standing in the driveway, staring at the lake house built with blood money. Wayne came up beside her, a comforting presence. "You okay?" "No." She thought about that school photo, protected in plastic, waiting 20 years in the dark. "But at least now I know. He didn't leave us. He didn't choose anything else over us." "He never would have," Wayne said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your dad loved 2 things in this world, you and your mom. Everything else was just work." Emma's phone buzzed. A text from her mom, working at the hospital. "Saw the news alert. They arrested Carl. Coming home early. Are you okay?" Emma typed back, her fingers flying across the screen. "He didn't leave us, Mom. He never left us." The lake sparkled in the morning sun, its surface a mirror, reflecting the unyielding truth. Somewhere out there, answers to the lingering questions awaited. Who had helped Carl move the truck? Why Garrison Quarry? How had he kept it secret for 20 years? But those would come. For now it was enough to know that Dale Hoffman had been exactly who she'd believed he was before that fateful November night. A good man, a loyal partner, a father who would never abandon his family, even if it had cost him everything to stay.
The Texaco on Route 287, a ghost of its former self, stood largely unchanged in 2 decades. The same cracked asphalt shimmered under the unforgiving Texas sun, the neon sign flickered with a tired pulse, and the same familiar bell chimed a mournful welcome as Emma pushed through the door. The clerk, a kid barely out of high school, glanced up from his phone, boredom etched into his young face. "Help you?" "I need to talk to someone who worked here in 1992. He shrugged, a dismissive gesture. "Lady, I wasn't even born." "The owner then, manager, anyone." Mr. Vega owns it, has since the 80s. He comes in Thursdays for inventory. Thursday, 3 days away. Emma bought a coffee she didn't want, the bitter liquid a mirror to her thoughts. She sat in her car, staring at the parking lot, an ordinary expanse of asphalt now imbued with a chilling significance. Dad had sat right here, November 8th, 1992. Right here where she was parked. His Peterbilt, a behemoth, taking up 3 spaces. Carl had been here too. They had his receipt now. 10:15 p.m., but Dad's receipt said 11:47. That gap? An hour and 32 minutes? Gnawed at her. A silent, unsettling question. Her phone buzzed, Sheriff Garrett's name a stark command on the screen. Carl's not talking, lawyered up, but we found something in his house. A rustling of paper, a faint static. A key to a storage unit. Berkeley's Self-Storage, Unit 47. His wife says he's had it since 1993. Want me to meet you there? Already here. You should see this. Berkeley's Self-Storage, a labyrinth of orange doors baking under the Texas sun, sat behind the skeletal remains of the old freight depot. Unit 47, climate-controlled, the expensive kind, stood open. Garrett and his deputies already inside, photographing its contents. Boxes, dozens of them, meticulously labeled with dates. Emma's gaze fixed on one marked November 1992. Can I? Gloves first, Garrett handed her. Latex, the thin material a barrier against the past. We think he kept records of everything. Some kind of insurance in case anyone came after him. Emma opened the November box, a treasure trove of photos, truck manifests, warehouse logs, and at the very bottom, nestled among the paper, a cassette tape, labeled November 8th, 1992, DH. Jesus Christ, Garrett breathed, his voice barely audible. Dad recorded his runs sometimes, said it helped him stay awake, talking through his thoughts. She held the tape, a fragile relic, as if it might shatter under the weight of its secrets. He must have been recording that night.
They drove to the station in silence, the tape a silent scream between them. The evidence tech, a young man with a reverence for antiquated technology, produced an old cassette player, the kind Emma remembered from childhood. The tape clicked into place, a hiss of static, then her father's voice, alive, tired, 20 years dead. 2300 hours, November 8th. Loading dock was a mess tonight. Carl showed up drunk again. Had to cover his... The recording cut off. A jarring silence. Then picked up again. Back on 287. Carl followed me to the Texaco. Says he needs to talk about the business. Christ, I know what that means. More money. Dolores called Linda yesterday. They're behind on the house. I can't keep... Another cut. 11:45. Carl's getting in. He's pretty worked up about... Carl's voice slurred, cut in. Just drive, Dale. Drive and listen. You're drunk. I'm desperate. There's a difference. You know what Tony Castellano does to people who owe him 47 grand? That's your problem, Carl. No, that's our problem. He'll come after the business, after both of us. The truck engine rumbled, the telltale click of a turn signal, the grind of shifting gears audible. Carl, what's that? Insurance papers. Sign them. I'm driving. Pull over then. There's a spot up ahead, the old Garrison Quarry road. Emma's chest tightened, a cold knot of dread. Wayne grabbed her hand, his grip a silent anchor. Dad's voice again, careful now, tinged with a dangerous calm. This changes the beneficiary to the company. Temporary. Just till I pay off Tony. You die, God forbid, the business gets the money, pays the debts, everyone's safe. No, Dale, please. I said no and put that away. What, the gun, Carl? Think I didn't notice? Put it away. Silence. Only the engine's rhythmic hum. Then Carl's voice, different now, steadier,
laced with a terrifying resolve. I can't go back without this signed. Then don't go back. They'll kill me. Call the police. File bankruptcy. Hell, I'll loan you what I can. You have $8,000 because that's what I need by tomorrow, or they break my legs. First my legs, then my hands, then my head. Carl, sign the fucking papers, Dale. No. The turn signal clicked again. Gravel crunched under tires. The engine died. Why are we at the quarry, Dad? Voice, a tight wire of barely suppressed fear. It's quiet. We need to talk this through. We can talk at the office. Get out. Carl, get out. Car doors opened, the faint whistle of wind, the distant chirping of crickets, the ragged sound of her father breathing. You're going to disappear, Carl said, his voice a low, chilling whisper. Take the truck, drive to Mexico. I'll tell everyone you ran off. Insurance pays out. I cover the debts. Everyone lives. Except my family thinks I abandoned them. Better than dead, because those are your options, Dale. You leave, or what, you'll shoot me? You're not a killer, Carl. I'm not going to die for your principles, and I'm not abandoning my daughter for your gambling debts. Footsteps on gravel moving away from the recorder. Dale, please, I'm begging you. No. They have my picture, my address. They know about Dolores. Should have thought about that before you started gambling. I was trying to make us money. The business was struggling.
The business was fine until you started skimming. Silence. Long enough that Emma feared the tape had stopped. Then a sound like a firecracker, small and sharp. A thud. Carl's voice, closer to the recorder now, a strangled gasp. Fuck. 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 Dale, come on. I didn't mean... Oh, God. Dragging sounds. Grunting. Then Carl's ragged sobs. The truck door opened. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You made me. You wouldn't just... The engine roared to life, the truck moving. Gravel, then nothing. Then the splash. Smaller than Emma expected, like someone diving into a pool. Then Carl's voice, very close to the recorder, trying to sound official, detached. November 8th, 1992, 12:47 a.m. Dale Hoffman has abandoned his truck and cargo, location unknown. I'm recovering the vehicle for Twin Pines Trucking. The tape ran out. Nobody spoke. Emma stared at the cassette player, willing it to play more, to give her father's voice back, to rewrite the ending. Wayne had his head in his hands, his body shaking. Even Garrett, a man accustomed to the grim realities of his profession, looked visibly shaken. That's murder one, the sheriff said, his voice flat. Premeditated. He brought the gun, picked the location. He kept the tape, Emma said, a tremor in her voice. Why keep it? In case anyone questioned the story. Garrett rewound the tape carefully. Carl always did keep detailed records. Emma stood up, needing air, needing to escape the suffocating weight of the truth. Outside, the sun was too bright, too indifferent. She called her mother. Mom, they have a tape. Dad recorded it. What kind of tape? His last night. Carl shot him. We heard it happen. Silence. Then Linda started crying. Truly crying, the kind of raw, guttural grief Emma hadn't heard since those first agonizing weeks after Dad disappeared. He said no. He could have lived if he'd just signed, but he said no, he wouldn't leave us. That stubborn, stupid, wonderful man. Emma watched traffic pass the station. Regular people living regular lives, oblivious to the fact that a 20-year murder had just been solved by a dead man's own voice. There's going to be a trial, Emma said. Dolores will testify. The tape will be played. Good. Let everyone hear it. Let them know Dale Hoffman died rather than abandon his family. Wayne came outside, lit a cigarette with shaking hands, a habit he'd abandoned years ago. Are you okay? Emma asked. I wanted to hurt him. Wayne confessed, his voice rough. "When I heard that tape, I wanted to drive back to that lake house." He stopped, took a deep breath. Dale wouldn't want that. "No." Carl's wife called the station. "Wants to talk to you," Garrett said. Emma found Dolores in interview room 2, looking older than her 63 years. A box of tissues and a manila envelope beside her. "I brought something," Dolores said, her voice a thin whisper. "Found it in Carl's office when I was packing to leave." She slid out a faded photo. Dale and Carl, young, maybe 25, standing in front of their first truck, both grinning, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Brothers in everything but blood.
"They were so close once," Dolores said, a distant look in her eyes. "Before the gambling, before the debts. Carl loved your father. That's what makes this worse. He killed the only real friend he ever had." "Then why?" "Fear makes people into monsters. Carl was so scared of those collectors, he couldn't see past it." Dolores pulled out another item, a logbook. "This is Dale's from the truck. Carl kept it." Emma opened it. November 8th, 1992. The final entry in Dad's neat handwriting. "Carl needs help. Going to talk to him tonight about getting treatment. Maybe I'll threaten to tell Dolores if he doesn't stop. He's sick, not bad. We can fix this." Even at the end, Dad had believed Carl could be saved. "There's one more thing," Dolores said, pulling out a small key. "Safety deposit box, First National Bank. Carl doesn't know I knew about it." Emma looked at the key, a silent question in her eyes. "What's in it?" "The rest of the insurance money. What he didn't spend on debts. He saved it. Can you believe that? Like he was keeping it for Dale to come back." Dolores laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. $130,000 sitting there for 20 years. "It's yours. Yours and your mother's. I already talked to the lawyers." Emma stared at the key. Blood money, Wayne had called it, but also college tuition, Mom's mortgage, 20 years of survival. He'd said Dad would be proud of her at her wedding. Dale would be proud, but not because Carl walked her down the aisle. Because you never stopped defending him. Even when everyone said he'd left, you defended him. Emma thought about that 8-year-old in the photo, grinning with missing teeth. She'd grown up without him, but she'd grown up loyal to his memory. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of us could do. Stay loyal to the people we love, even when they're gone. Even when the world tells us to let go. Maybe that's what Dale had given her by saying no to Carl that night. Not just his presence, but proof that some things matter more than money, more than fear, more than survival. Some things are worth dying for, even if it takes 20 years to understand what they were. Thursday morning arrived, a canvas of gray humidity that mirrored Emma's unsettled spirit. She sat in the Texaco parking lot, a sentinel, watching Eddie Vega, a man in his 70s who moved with the assistance of a cane, unlocked the door. His eyes, though, were surprisingly sharp when she introduced herself. "Hoffman," he said slowly, the name a ghost on his lips. "Dale Hoffman's girl. You remember him?" "I remember that night. FBI, insurance investigators, reporters, everyone wanted to see those tapes. Kept them for years before I finally recorded over them." He led her inside, past the colorful array of chips and the cold embrace of the beer coolers. "Your dad was a regular. Good man. Always exact change." The tapes from that night showed him buying 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches. That's all. Carl wasn't in the frame, stayed by the trucks. Eddie pulled out a cloth, his movements deliberate as he began to wipe the counter. But there was something else. Never told anyone because they never asked the right question. Emma leaned forward, her heart quickening its rhythm. What question? They all wanted to know what happened. Nobody asked about what happened before. Eddie pointed towards the parking lot, his gaze distant. There was a third vehicle that night. Came in about 10 p.m. Left before your dad got here. Old Chevy Suburban. Brown. Who's Roy Briggs? Emma's stomach plummeted, a cold, sickening lurch. Roy Briggs. She barely remembered him. A quiet man who worked at the rail yard, who had died in 2003. You're sure? Roy bought cigarettes and a gas can. Said Carl's truck broke down near Garrison Quarry. Needed help getting it running. Eddie's cloth stopped moving. A silent punctuation. Funny thing about that. Carl's truck was here an hour later. Running fine. Emma called Garrett from her car, her voice urgent. Carl's brother was involved, Roy Briggs. Roy's been dead almost 20 years. But his widow's not. Beth Briggs lives over in Millerville. I'll meet you there.
But Emma didn't wait. Millerville was a mere 15 minutes away, a cluster of houses clinging to the skeletal remains of a closed textile mill. Beth Briggs lived in a double-wide trailer at the end of Sawmill Road, her yard a cluttered sanctuary of ceramic angels and wind chimes. Beth answered the door in a housecoat, a cigarette dangling from her fingers, the smoke a hazy halo around her 60-something face. You're Dale's girl. Not a question, but a weary acknowledgement. I need to know about November 8th, 1992. Beth took a long, slow drag. Been waiting for this visit. Come in. The trailer reeked of cigarettes and cats, a pungent tapestry of forgotten lives. Photos covered every available surface. Roy and Beth, no children, just them growing older in each frame until Roy vanished from the visual narrative. Liver cancer, Beth said, her voice flat. Ate him up in 6 months. But before he died, he told me things. Morphine loosens tongues. What did he tell you? That he helped Carl move your daddy's truck to the quarry. Beth sat heavily in a worn recliner, the springs groaning in protest. Carl called him that night, panicking, said there'd been an accident. Roy found him at the quarry with Dale's body, truck still running. Emma's hands clenched, her knuckles white. And Roy just helped him? Brothers, Beth said, as if that single word explained the unfathomable. Roy drove Carl's truck back. Carl drove your daddy's into the water. They made it look like Dale drove off on his own. Why didn't you tell anyone?
With what proof? Roy was dying. Carl had that insurance money, and your family had already grieved. Beth lit another cigarette, the small flame illuminating the resignation in her eyes. Besides, I was scared. Carl came by after Roy's funeral, said how sorry he was about my loss, said he'd make sure I was taken care of. Been sending me $500 a month ever since. Hush money. Survival money. You think a widow with no skills gets by on Social Security? Garrett's cruiser pulled up outside, its red and blue lights a silent, ominous presence. Beth watched him approach through the window. I'll testify, she said, her voice imbued with a newfound strength. Roy's gone. Carl's caught. Nothing left to protect. Garrett took Beth's statement, his pen scratching rhythmically across the paper, while Emma stood in the yard staring at those ceramic angels. 2 brothers. The Briggs boys, bound by blood and a heinous secret, had conspired to hide a murder. One out of guilt, the other out of misguided loyalty, and they had nearly gotten away with it. Emma's phone buzzed. Her mother. The bank called about that safety deposit box. Dolores gave me the key.
There's more than money in there. Documents, photos. The banker says it looks like Carl documented everything. Emma drove to First National, met her mother in the lobby, her heart thrumming with a desperate anticipation. The banker, a nervous man named Peterson, led them to a private room. The box was larger than Emma expected. Inside, bundles of cash secured with rubber bands, insurance documents, and underneath, a manila envelope, again marked insurance. But it wasn't for the business.
Photos. Carl had taken photos that night. Dale's truck at the quarry edge, Dale's body barely visible in the cab, the truck half submerged, and finally Carl and Roy standing by Carl's truck, Roy's face blurred but undeniably present. "Evidence," Linda said quietly, her voice tinged with a chilling awe. "He kept evidence of his own crime?" "Leverage," Emma corrected, the word cold and hard, in case Roy ever turned on him. There was one more item, a cassette tape, unlabeled. Emma looked at her mother, who nodded slowly. They drove to the sheriff's station, played it in the same stark room where they had heard Dad's last words. Carl's voice, drunk and rambling, filled the silent space. "November 9th, 1992. Roy helped me tonight. Dale's gone. Made it look like he ran. Insurance will pay out. I can cover Tony's debt. Nobody has to know. Nobody has to—" His voice broke. Then he began to sob, a wretched, guttural sound that lasted for 3 agonizing minutes. "I killed my best friend. Dale's dead because I couldn't stop gambling, but the family will be okay. Insurance will take care of them. That's something, right? That has to be something." The tape ended, and the silence that followed even more profound than the weeping. "He was trying to justify it," Linda said, quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Even then." Emma thought about Carl at her wedding, smiling, telling her Dale would be proud. Living with this for 20 years. How did someone do that? How did they smile at birthday parties and barbecues, knowing they had murdered someone who trusted them? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your dad wasn't supposed to die. Neither was Roy. Careful how deep you dig." Emma showed Garrett. He immediately called for a trace. "Someone's worried," he said, his gaze sharp. "Someone else knows something." Emma's mind raced, connecting the dots. Tony Castellano, the bookie Carl owed money to. Still alive, supposedly legitimate now, running a construction company, the same company that had gotten the contract to drain Garrison Quarry. "Oh my God," she said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Tony knew. He had to. The quarry. Garrett was already moving, his voice grim. If Tony's company found the truck on purpose, then this isn't over. They drove to Castellano Construction, a legitimate-looking operation of trucks and equipment yards. Tony himself was in his office, 68 years old, silver-haired, looking like someone's benign grandfather. "Sheriff, Miss Hoffman, I heard about Dale. Terrible thing." "Cut the crap," Garrett said, his voice laced with an undisguised contempt. "Your company just happened to get the contract for the quarry where Dale's truck was hidden." Tony smiled, a thin, knowing curve of his lips. "I bid on a lot of projects. Win some." "You knew Carl owed you money in '92. Ancient history. Debt was paid with insurance money from Dale Hoffman's death. I wouldn't know about that. Carl paid cash." Emma stepped forward, her rage a palpable force. "You knew the truck was there. Prove it." "Roy told his wife before he died." Tony's smile faded slightly,
a flicker of something colder in his eyes. Roy was sick, said a lot of things. He said you told Carl about the quarry, said you suggested it as a good place to hide something. Fiction. Then you won't mind if we check your records from 1992, see if there's any connection between you and the quarry before now. Tony stood up, a predatory glint in his eyes. Get a warrant. Outside, Emma was shaking with fury. He knew. He pushed him to it. Maybe, but knowing and proving are different things. Garrett looked tired, the weight of years evident on his face. Carl pulled the trigger. That's what we can prove. So Tony just walks? Unless we find something else. Emma thought about those photos in the safety deposit box. Carl documenting everything. If he'd photographed the murder scene, what else had he documented? We need to go back to the storage unit. There has to be more.
The November 1992 box had been removed as evidence, but dozens more remained. December 1992, January 1993, each one meticulously labeled. In March 1993, they found it. A receipt from Castellano Construction to Twin Pines Trucking for consulting services. $20,000. That's not consulting, Garrett said, his gaze fixed on the paper. That's a finder's fee. Tony charged Carl for telling him about the quarry. More receipts emerged, a steady stream of payments from Twin Pines to Castellano Construction through 1997, nearly $100,000 total. Tony owned him, Emma said, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Killed Dale, then bled the business dry. In the last box, 1998, there was a contract. Twin Pines Trucking sold to Castellano Holdings for $1. That's why Carl sold. Tony took the whole thing. Emma stared at the contract, a chilling testament to the depth of the betrayal. Her father had died for a business that ended up in his killer's hands anyway. All of it for nothing. "We have enough," Garrett declared, his voice grim. "Conspiracy, accessory after the fact, extortion. Tony's going down too." Emma nodded, but her mind was still on the text. Neither was Roy. "Sheriff, when did Roy die?" 2003, Beth said. "Of liver cancer. Right." "Roy didn't drink. Dad mentioned it once. Roy was allergic to alcohol, broke out in hives." Garrett's face changed, a dawning horror in his eyes. "You think—" "I think Tony cleaned house. Roy knew too much."
They drove back to Beth's trailer. She was still in her recliner, but something was different. Another car in the driveway, Tony Castellano's Lincoln. Garrett called for backup, but Emma was already moving. Through the window, she could see Tony standing over Beth, his hands gesturing, his voice a low, menacing rumble. Beth looked terrified. "Stay here," Garrett ordered, but Emma followed him to the door. "Keep your mouth shut," Tony was saying. "Same deal as before. You talk, you lose everything." "Police," Garrett announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "Step away from Mrs. Briggs." Tony turned, surprisingly unperturbed. "Sheriff, just visiting an old friend." "Beth, are you okay?" Beth nodded, but her hands were shaking. "Mr. Castellano was just leaving," Garrett said, his tone icy. Tony straightened his jacket, a thin smile playing on his lips. "Mrs. Briggs and I have an understanding. 20 years of understanding. Right, Beth?" Beth looked at Emma, at Garrett, at Tony. Then, with a sudden defiant strength, she straightened in her chair. "Roy didn't die of cancer. He was poisoned. Slow. Over months. Tony brought him supplements, said they'd help with his liver. Roy trusted him." Tony's face went cold, his composure finally cracking. "Prove it." Roy kept one of the bottles, hid it.
Said if anything happened to me, make sure it got tested. Beth stood up, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a supplement bottle, dusty and old, its label faded by time. 20 years I've kept this. 20 years of being afraid. Tony lunged for it, but Garrett was faster, cuffs clicking on before Tony could even reach the bottle. Anthony Castellano, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory after the fact, extortion, and suspected murder of Roy Briggs. Tony laughed, a chilling, guttural sound. You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes. But Emma wasn't listening. She was looking at Beth, at the woman who had kept evidence for 20 years, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Just like Carl had kept his tapes and photos, just like Dad had kept recording that night, everyone documenting their sins, waiting to be caught or waiting to be cleared. The truth didn't always set you free. Sometimes it just showed you the size of the prison you'd been living in all along.
Sheriff Garrett's cruisers sliced through the gathering dusk, their red and blue lights painting the Millerville hills in ghostly hues. He pulled up to Beth Briggs's double-wide, his arrival as inevitable as judgment. But Emma, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, hadn't waited. Through the grimy living room window, she'd seen Tony Castellano, the architect of so much darkness, looming over Beth, his hands gesticulating, his voice a low, menacing rumble. The old woman, hunched in her worn recliner, looked like she might shatter. "Stay here," Garrett had ordered, but Emma's body had already betrayed her. Each step toward the door was a rebellion against 20 years of silence, a burning pursuit of truth. "Keep your mouth shut," Tony was hissing at Beth. "Same deal as before. You talk, you lose everything." The sheriff yanked the door open, his grave voice cutting through the tension like a cold blade. "Police, step away from Mrs. Briggs." Tony turned, surprisingly unperturbed, a thin, predatory smile stretching his lips. "Sheriff, just visiting an old friend." "Beth, are you okay?" Emma's question was a barely audible whisper. Beth nodded, but her trembling hands betrayed the fear that still gripped her. Garrett, his gaze piercing, his tone icy, added, "Mr. Castellano was just leaving." Tony straightened his jacket, his smile widening. "Mrs. Briggs and I have an understanding. 20 years of understanding. Right, Beth?"
The silence hung heavy, laden with the past. Beth looked at Emma, then at Garrett, then finally at Tony, the weight of 2 decades of secrets pressing down on her. But then a new strength seemed to animate her. She straightened in her chair, her eyes, once fearful, now gleaming with a newfound defiance. Roy didn't die of cancer. Her voice, though rough from decades of cigarettes, now carried the weight of revelation. He was poisoned, slow, over months. Emma's breath caught. Tony brought him supplements, said they'd help with his liver. Roy trusted him. Tony's face went cold, his composure finally cracking. "Prove it." Roy kept one of the bottles. Beth stood up, her movements slow but deliberate. She walked to a wooden cabinet, pulled out an old supplement bottle, dusty and aged, its label faded by time. 20 years I've kept this. 20 years of being afraid. Tony lunged, a silent cry of rage caught in his throat, but Garrett was faster. Cuffs clicked on before Tony could even reach the bottle. "Anthony Castellano, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory after the fact, extortion, and suspected murder of Roy Briggs." Tony let out a chilling, guttural laugh. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes." But Emma wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on Beth, on the woman who had kept evidence for 20 years, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Just like Carl had kept his tapes and photos, just like her father had kept recording that night. Everyone documenting their sins,
waiting to be caught, or waiting to be cleared. The truth didn't always set you free. Sometimes it just showed you the size of the prison you'd been living in all along. The days following Tony Castellano's arrest were a whirlwind. The Garrison Quarry became an official excavation site, transformed into a sprawling crime scene. Beneath the dark, silent waters, FBI divers made grim discoveries. A 1981 sedan, its driver shot in the head. A 1988 van, 2 bodies riddled with bullets inside. 3 more vehicles, all reported stolen at the time. Their occupants, missing persons, swallowed by water and oblivion. Tony's been killing people for 30 years, Garrett said, his face grim as they reviewed the preliminary reports. He used the quarry as his personal cemetery. The investigation, unexpectedly vast, was quickly taken over by the FBI. The Castellano construction empire began to unravel, revealing widespread money laundering, murder, and racketeering. Carl Briggs, imprisoned, agreed to become a key witness, trading his testimony for a reduced sentence, life without parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. Emma visited him once in the visiting room before the trial. Carl had aged prematurely, a broken man in his orange jumpsuit, gray stubble on his chin, and a body that seemed to have shrunk. "I know about the letters," Emma said. "Dad knew you might try something." Carl nodded, a heavy burden in his eyes. "Dale was always smarter than me. He had hoped you'd back out. Even at the end, he believed you were better than this. I wasn't." "No, you weren't." A silence settled, heavy with unspoken words and regrets. "The tape from the truck," Carl asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Does it—" "We hear the shot," Emma replied, her voice steady. "We hear you crying." "Good," Carl said, a sigh escaping his chest. "Everyone should know what I did, what I took from you." Emma stood to leave, then stopped. "Dad wrote that he hoped his death would save you, that you'd get clean, take care of us." Carl let out a bitter laugh. "I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I looked at you, I saw him. Every good thing I did was with his blood money." His gaze became vacant. "I could have confessed any time in 20 years. Lost Dolores, gone to prison. I was a coward, Emma. That's all. A coward who killed a brave man." Emma left him, her heart heavy, leaving him to his ghosts. Outside, in front of the prison, Wayne was waiting. "How was it?" "Empty. Like talking to a ghost." They drove to the cemetery, where they had finally been able to give Dale a proper burial. A small, simple stone bore his name, his dates, and the inscription, "Beloved Father and Husband." Linda was already there, arranging fresh flowers. The prosecutor called. "Trial starts Monday." Emma nodded. They would all have to testify, reliving that night through evidence and testimony. But at least now there would be justice. Or something close to it.
"You know what I keep thinking," Linda said. "Dale knew something might happen, but he still kissed us goodbye that morning like it was normal. Still made your lunch, still fixed that loose board on the porch. He lived his last day like he had a million more." "Because he hoped Carl would change his mind," Emma suggested. "Or because he wanted our last memories to be normal, not shadowed by fear." Emma thought about that. About her father's choice to face danger rather than run, about Carl's choice to pull the trigger, about Tony's choice to poison Roy, about Roy's choice to help his brother. Choices that had rippled through the decades, destroying families, creating ghosts, but also about Beth's choice to keep evidence, about Dolores's choice to testify, about Wayne's choice to never stop defending his brother, about her mother's choice to rebuild their lives, and her own choice, now, to let this define her or to simply let it be part of her story. "I'm pregnant," she said, suddenly. She hadn't meant to announce it here, now, but it felt right. Linda turned, eyes wide. Dale dropped his cigarette. "About 6 weeks," Emma continued. "Just found out." Her mother hugged her, crying again, but different tears this time. "Dale would have been so happy. A grandfather." Emma touched her still flat stomach. New life growing while they sorted through old death. The timing felt cosmic, planned, although she knew it was just coincidence. Or maybe not. Maybe this was Dad's final gift. Not the insurance money, nor the evidence, not even the truth, but the reminder that life continues, that families endure, that love survives, even murder, even decades, even the bottom of a quarry. If it was a boy, she would name him Dale. That was decided, and she would tell him the truth when he was old enough, that his grandfather was a good man who had died rather than abandon his family, who had seen death coming and faced it with the hope that his killer might find redemption. This was a legacy worth preserving, even if it had taken 20 years to surface.
Emma couldn't shake the cryptic text. Your father wasn't the only one. Check the quarry records, 1978 to 1992. The FBI had taken over the quarry investigation, but Emma knew a clerk at the county records office, Brenda, who'd gone to school with her mom. Garrison Quarry, Brenda said, pulling dusty boxes. Closed in 78, but there's something strange. Ownership transferred to Castellano Holdings in 1975, but the paperwork was filed by Morrison Development. Emma's stomach dropped. Jack Morrison. His father, actually. Jack had taken over in 1980. Brenda pulled out another file. Look at this. Morrison Development also owned 3 other quarries, all closed between 1976 and 1982, all sold to shell companies connected to Tony Castellano. 4 quarries, 4 dumping grounds. Emma drove to the hardware store where she worked, called in sick, then headed to Morrison Transport's warehouse. She needed to know Jack Morrison's connection. The industrial district was quiet at midday. Through the chain-link fence, she could see trucks being loaded. Normal shipping, nothing suspicious. But something felt wrong about the whole setup. A hand grabbed her shoulder. Emma spun, almost screamed. A woman stood there, maybe 40, wearing a trucker's jacket. "You're Emma Hoffman. Who are you?" "I'm Maria Vasquez. I drive for Morrison, and I knew your dad." Emma's heart hammered. "You're the one who sent that text?" "We need to move. Security does rounds." Maria led her to a pickup parked behind a dead warehouse. "Your dad trained me. Summer of 92, just before he died. He was a good man." "What's Morrison Transport moving?" "Same thing Tony had Twin Pines moving after your dad died. Drugs from Mexico. But that's not the worst part." Maria lit a cigarette, her hands shaking. Jack Morrison was Tony's silent partner. Has been since the 80s. Emma felt the ground tilt. Jack Morrison, who'd given her a job after Dad disappeared, who'd been at every town council meeting, every charity drive, who'd hired half the town's kids. Dad found out, didn't he? The Dallas run her dad was supposed to take. It wasn't machine parts. It was a drug shipment. Your dad would have discovered it when he made the delivery. That's why Carl had to kill him that night. But Carl said it was about the gambling debts. That was real too. Tony used Carl's debts to force him to kill Dale. But Jack Morrison gave the order. Maria pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been collecting evidence for 15 years. After what happened to your dad, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes open. Inside the envelope, shipping manifests with dual entries, one official, one real. Photos of trucks at border crossings, a list of dates and locations. Why didn't she go to the police? Jack owns half the town. The other half are too scared. Maria started her truck. But now Tony's arrested. Jack's nervous. He's moving everything, tonight at 2 a.m. He's cleaning house, moving all the evidence out of state. Emma's phone buzzed. Sheriff Garrett. Where are you? His voice was tight. Industrial District. Get home now. Someone torched Carl's storage unit. Fire department's there, but everything is gone. Emma looked at Maria. They're destroying evidence. Like I said, cleaning house. Maria handed her another envelope. This is my insurance. Recordings, documents, photos, everything I could gather. You want justice for your dad? Jack Morrison has to fall. Emma drove home, mind racing. She found Garrett at the storage facility, watching firefighters spray water on the blackened ruins of Unit 47. Accelerant everywhere. Professional job. It was Morrison. Emma showed him Maria's evidence. Jack Morrison ordered Dale's murder. Garrett went pale. Emma, Jack Morrison donated $300,000 to my election campaign. Are you saying... I'm saying be careful. If this is true, he owns half the town. Emma's phone buzzed. Mom calling. Someone broke into the house. Linda's voice shook. They didn't take anything, but Dale's photos are all turned backwards, every single one.
A message they could reach her family. Emma drove to her mother's house. Linda was on the porch with Wayne, both looking scared. This was on the kitchen table. Wayne handed her a note. Some rocks are better left unturned. Your father learned that. We're getting close, Emma said. Morrison's scared. Morrison? Wayne's face darkened. Tony Morrison was at Dale's funeral? He gave the eulogy. Emma remembered Morrison talking about what a good man Dale was, how the town had lost a pillar of the community, all while knowing he'd ordered the murder. She hid Maria's evidence in her car, under the spare tire. Then she called Maria back. Can you meet tonight? We need more proof. Can't. Morrison's got me on a run to Houston. But there's someone else who wants to talk. Pete Kowalski. The name was familiar from the old news articles. Tony's enforcer from the 90s. He's dying. Cancer. Has maybe weeks left. He called me, said he wants to clear his conscience about your dad. Where? The old rest stop on Highway 6. Midnight. But Emma, be careful. Pete's burned a lot of bridges.
At 11:45 p.m., Emma parked at the rest stop. Abandoned since the new highway opened, just crumbling concrete and dead lights. One other car waited, an old Crown Victoria. Pete Kowalski looked like death walking, thin, gray, breathing from an oxygen tank, but his eyes were sharp. You look like him, he said. Same stubborn set to the jaw. Tell me about Morrison. Jack and Tony were partners since '79. Tony was muscle, Jack was money. They trucked trucking companies to move product from Mexico. Clean businesses for dirty money. Pete pulled out a cigarette, laughed at the irony, but lit it anyway. Your dad's company was perfect. Small, family-run, good reputation. So they targeted him. They tried to buy in first. Your dad said no. Then they went after Carl, knew he was weak, got him in debt, used that as leverage. But Carl loved my father. That's why it worked. Tony knew Carl would do anything to protect Dolores, even kill his best friend. Pete took a long drag. But your dad figured it out. The week before he died, he went to see Jack. Emma's breath caught. Dad confronted Morrison. November 1st. I was there, sitting in Jack's office. Your dad walked in, told Jack to leave Twin Pines alone. Jack laughed, said truckers were replaceable. What did Dad say? He'd go to the FBI, had evidence of the drug running. Jack told him to go ahead. Who'd believe a trucker over the town's biggest employer? Pete dropped the cigarette. Your dad left. Jack turned to me and Tony and said, "Fix this." 1 week later, your dad was dead. You were there when they planned it? I gave Tony the idea about the quarry. My uncle worked there in the 70s, told me about the deep spots that never got mapped. Pete coughed hard. I've been carrying that for 20 years. A car engine started nearby, then another. Headlights blazed from 3 directions. Fuck, Pete muttered. They followed you, or me. Does it matter? Pete pulled out a revolver. Get behind the car.
The vehicle stopped in a triangle, boxing them in. Men got out. Emma recognized one from Morrison Transport. Then Jack Morrison himself stepped into the light. 70 years old, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. Pete, he said pleasantly, you should be in hospice. Wanted some fresh air. And Miss Hoffman, your father had that same stubborn look right before we discussed his future. Emma stood up. You ordered his murder. I suggested Carl solve his problem. How he did it was his choice. Morrison smiled. Just like you chose to come here tonight. People know where I am. No, they don't. You came alone, just like your father always worked alone. Hoffman family tradition. Noble stupidity. Pete raised his gun. 3 others raised theirs. Here's what happens, Morrison said. Pete shoots himself. Guilt over all those years of violence. You disappear. Another Hoffman who couldn't handle the truth about Daddy. Tragic. Maria Vasquez has evidence. She'll talk. Morrison checked his watch. Maria's truck just jackknifed on Route 10. Brake line failure. Terrible accident, though. She'll probably survive, if you cooperate. Emma's phone was recording in her pocket, but Morrison noticed her hand. Phone. Now. She handed it over. He dropped it, crushed it under his heel. Your father thought he was smart, too. Recordings, evidence, backup plans. Morrison stepped closer. Want to know what he said when I told him Carl would kill him? You're lying. He said Carl's not a killer, even after I showed him the photos of Carl at the casino, the IOUs, the gun Carl had bought. Your father still believed in his friend. Morrison laughed. That faith got him killed. You manipulated Carl. I gave him a choice, his wife or his friend. He chose wisely. Pete coughed, doubled over. Blood spotted his hand. Lung cancer's a bitch, he gasped, then louder. Almost as much of a bitch as you are, Jack. Morrison sighed. Kill them both. Pete turned the gun toward Emma, then pivoted and shot Morrison's man on the left. Chaos exploded. Gunfire, shouting, headlights swinging wild as drivers dove for cover. Run! Pete screamed, firing again.
Emma ran into the darkness, heard Morrison shouting orders. An engine roared. Pete's Crown Vic smashing through their line. More gunshots. A crash. She kept running, hit the tree line. Crashed through brush. Behind her, flashlights swept the rest stop. They'd hunt her. But she knew these woods. Had camped here with Dad as a kid. The quarry was 2 miles north, where it all started. She had to make it there. Garrett would check her first when Mom reported her missing. Emma ran through darkness, guided by memory and moonlight. Behind her, Morrison's men spread out, searching. She reached the quarry as dawn broke. The water black and still where they'd pulled Dad's truck from. Her car was there. How had she not driven here? Then Wayne stepped out from behind it. Emma, your mom called when you didn't come home. Said you'd gone to meet someone about Dad. Wayne, we have to go.
Morrison is already here. Morrison emerged from Wayne's truck. Wayne's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Emma. They have my son. Grabbed him from college. Emma's cousin, Wayne's boy, 20 years old. You should have left it alone. Now more families get hurt. Let him go. This is between us. No, this is about everyone learning their place. Your father didn't, you didn't. Maybe your cousin will. Wayne pulled out a gun, an old .22, hand shaking. Wayne, no! They have my boy. But I can't do this again. Can't lose another person to this quarry. He turned the gun on Morrison. Let them both go, Jack. Morrison didn't flinch. You won't shoot. You're not Dale. You're weak like Carl. You're right. I'm not Dale. Dale tried to do the right thing. Me? I just want this over. He pulled the trigger. Morrison staggered, looked down at the spreading red on his white shirt. You shot me. Small caliber, just like you had Carl use on Dale. Poetic, right?
Morrison fell to his knees at the quarry's edge, the same spot where Carl had pushed Dad's truck in 20 years ago. You don't understand, Morrison gasped. The whole town runs on what I built. Without me, without you, maybe we can finally clean this place up. Wayne kept the gun trained on him. Emma, there's evidence in Morrison's truck. He was stupid enough to bring it. Wanted to show you before he killed you. Ego always was his weakness. Emma looked in the truck. Boxes of documents, photos and cassette tapes, dozens of them, all labeled with dates and initials. One marked DH11, January 1992. Dad's conversation with Morrison, the one Pete had described. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Morrison tried to stand, slipped on the wet rocks. The quarry edge crumbled under his weight. "Help me!" he gasped, hanging on to a root. Emma stepped forward, then stopped. Remembered Dad's voice on that tape, begging Carl to think. Remembered 20 years of believing he'd abandoned them. Wayne grabbed Morrison's wrist, pulled him up. You're going to live, and you're going to prison, and everyone's going to know what you did. Sheriff Garrett's cruiser roared up, followed by state police. Real state police, not local. The lead officer said, Wayne called us, said Jack Morrison was destroying evidence in a federal case. They took Morrison away in an ambulance, cuffed to the gurney. Wayne in another car, but not arrested. Self-defense, Garrett said. Emma stood at the quarry's edge, looking at the black water. Dad had died here, but the truth had lived. Her phone buzzed. Maria from the hospital. Survived the crash, talking to FBI now. It's over. Not over, but ending. Finally ending. The days following Morrison's arrest were a blur. The FBI raids began at dawn, just 3 days after his spectacular apprehension. Emma watched from her apartment window as black SUVs swarmed Morrison Transport. Agents in windbreakers carried out box after box. 20 years of evidence Morrison had kept, just like Carl. Everyone documenting their sins, waiting, consciously or not, to be caught. Tyler, Wayne's son, had been found unharmed in a motel outside Austin, abandoned by Morrison's men when news of the shooting spread. Wayne, meanwhile, was out on bail, the prosecutor quickly deeming it self-defense. Yet Emma could see the weight on him. Taking a life, even Morrison's, had cost him something. She was making coffee when someone knocked. Maria Vasquez stood there on crutches, her face still bruised from the crash. They didn't cut my brake lines, Maria said, coming in. Morrison lied about that. One of his trucks ran me off the road. Maria sat heavily at the kitchen table. But I'm testifying tomorrow. Federal grand jury.
She paused, her eyes locking onto Emma's. Your dad wasn't the first trucker Morrison and Tony killed. There were 3 others between 1985 and 1991, drivers who asked questions or refused to carry special cargo. Who were they? Emma asked, her throat tight. Ben Hutchkins, 1985, found dead in his cab. Heart attack, they said. He was 32. Maria's voice was a low hum, heavy with suppressed history. Mike Garrett, 1988. The name hung in the air, a chilling echo. Garrett. Like Sheriff Garrett. His brother. Truck burned on Interstate 20, ruled an accident. Tom Garrett was a rookie cop then, pushed for an investigation but got shut down. Maria pulled out a worn notebook. The third was Louise Palmer, 1991. Single mom, 2 kids. Her truck went off a bridge. No skid marks. Emma stared at the names, a cold dread spreading through her. Sheriff Garrett knew this whole time?
Maria nodded slowly. He suspected, but Morrison owned his superiors. Tom spent 20 years working his way up, waiting for a chance. Maria slid the notebook over. Louise Palmer's daughter works at the courthouse, Jennifer Palmer Cross. She's been helping me gather evidence. The name hit Emma like ice water. Jennifer Cross, the prosecutor handling Carl and Morrison's cases. She knows Morrison killed her mother? She's known for years, Maria confirmed, her voice grim. Been building a case file, waiting for the right moment. Maria stood, the crutches scraping on the linoleum. She wants to meet you today. There's something in your dad's truck she needs to see. They met at the impound lot. Jennifer Palmer Cross, 43, sharp-featured, with her mother's eyes looking out from an old photo she carried. I was 9 when Mom died, she said, her gaze fixed on Dale's Peterbilt, old enough to know it wasn't an accident. Her voice was tight with years of suppressed pain. She'd called me that night, said if anything happened, remember the name Morrison. Why didn't you? Emma started. I was 9, Jennifer cut her off, a brittle edge to her voice. Then I was a teenager nobody believed. Then I was a law student who needed to stay quiet to get into position. Jennifer climbed into the truck's cab, the familiar scent of oil and long-dead lake water filling the air. Your dad hides something else. Maria remembers him working on something the week before he died. Jennifer ran her fingers along the dashboard, then pulled it open. Behind the radio, wrapped in plastic, was another tape and a small, antique-looking key. The tape was labeled, chillingly, Insurance, November 5th, 1992. Emma's hands shook as she took it. 3 days before her dad died.
They played it in Garrett's office. Dale's voice, tired but determined, filled the small room, a ghost speaking across 2 decades. This is Dale Hoffman. If you're hearing this, something's happened to me. The following is my sworn statement about Morrison Transport and Twin Pines Trucking. Jack Morrison and Tony Castellano have been using local trucking companies to transport drugs from Mexico since at least 1985. They killed Ben Hutchkins when he found a shipment. They killed Mike Garrett when he tried to report it. They killed Louise Palmer when she refused to drive for them. I have proof. Safety Deposit Box 447 at First National. The key is hidden in my truck. The evidence includes photos of drug shipments, recordings of Morrison and Tony discussing murders, and documents showing the money laundering through Morrison Development. Carl Briggs is being blackmailed. They're using his gambling debts to force him to do something. I think they want him to kill me. Carl's not a killer, but he's desperate. If I die, check Carl's gun. He bought a .22 last month. I saw the receipt. I'm not running. Emma needs stability. Linda needs our home. And if I run, Morrison and Tony will just kill someone else. Maybe Carl. Maybe another driver who asks questions. So I'm leaving this recording. I'm gathering evidence and I'm trusting that someday someone will care enough to use it. The tape ended. Jennifer was crying, silent tears tracing paths down her face. Garrett had his head in his hands, his usual stoicism shattered. "He knew everything," Emma whispered, a fresh wave of grief and awe washing over her. "He could have stopped it." "How?" Garrett asked, his voice rough. "I tried for years to get evidence on Morrison. Every time I got close, witnesses disappeared or recanted." He looked up, his eyes meeting Emma's. "Your dad knew what we were up against." Emma held the key, small and heavy in her palm. "Safety deposit box 447.
The bank manager was nervous, had been since the FBI showed up. Box 447 required 2 keys, the one from Dale's truck and the bank's master. Inside, a cache of evidence that made Emma's stomach churn. Photographs of bodies in truck cabs. Morrison and Tony at clandestine meeting points. Drugs being transferred in plain sight. And at the bottom, a ledger in Dale's meticulous handwriting. Every suspicious death, every drug shipment he tracked, every illicit payment between Morrison companies. "This is it," Jennifer said, her voice shaking with grim triumph. "This breaks everything open." But there was one more envelope. Emma's name on it, in her father's familiar script. "Emma Bear, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're old enough to understand. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm sorry you had to grow up without me. But I need you to know leaving you was never a choice I would make. Morrison and Tony are evil men. They've killed friends of mine. They'll kill more if not stopped. I could run and take you and Mom somewhere safe, but then other families suffer. Other little girls lose their daddies. So I'm staying. I'm gathering evidence, and if they kill me, that evidence survives. You survive. The truth survives. I love you more than all the stars in Texas. And take care of your mom. Be brave, but not stupid. And remember, doing the right thing sometimes costs everything, but doing the wrong thing costs more. All my love, Dad. P.S. There's $10,000 cash in here. I've been saving it from runs. If something happens to me, this is yours. Don't let anyone tell you it's blood money. It's honest money for my honest girl." Emma couldn't see through the tears. 20 years this had been waiting. Her dad's final message, his final heart-wrenching gift.
"There's more," Jennifer said, looking through the ledger. "Names. Dozens of names. Everyone involved." She stopped at one page. Oh my God. Emma looked. A list of cops on Morrison's payroll, judges, city officials, and at the bottom, circled in red, inside man at FBI Dallas office. Identity unknown, but Morrison calls him Bishop. "That's why the FBI raids took so long," Garrett said, his face a mask of bitter realization. Morrison had someone inside. Jennifer's phone rang. She listened, her face going pale. "Carl's dead." "What?" "Found in his cell an hour ago, hanging. But his hands were bruised. Defensive wounds." She looked up, her voice hushed. Morrison cleaning house, even from a hospital bed. Emma's phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't answer," Garrett started, but Emma already had. "Ms. Hoffman," a man's voice, smooth, professional. "Special Agent David Bishop, FBI Dallas. I understand you found some interesting documents." Emma's blood went cold. Bishop, Morrison's inside man. "We need those documents brought to our office immediately for safekeeping." "I'll bring them to the local office," Emma said carefully. "No, Dallas today. Come alone." His voice hardened, a silk glove tightening around an iron fist. "Your cousin Tyler is such a nice young man. Be a shame if his car had mechanical problems on the highway." The line went dead. "He's threatening Tyler," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. Garrett was already on his phone. "State police, we need protection for Tyler Hoffman immediately." Jennifer grabbed the ledger. "We need copies now." They spent an hour at the sheriff's office, copying everything.
Then Emma called Bishop back. "I'll bring the originals, but if anything happens to my family—" "Nothing happens if you cooperate. Federal Building, Dallas, 3 hours." Emma looked at Garrett and Jennifer. "It's a trap." "Obviously," Jennifer said, a grim smile touching her lips. "But we can use that." The plan was simple. Emma would go wired, with state police following discreetly. Jennifer would simultaneously file everything with a federal judge she trusted in Austin. Garrett would protect the family. But plans never survive contact with the enemy. Emma was halfway to Dallas when her phone rang. Her mom, crying. "They took Wayne. Men in FBI jackets. Said he was being arrested for Morrison's shooting." Linda's voice was a ragged sob. "Where's Tyler?" "With me. Real state police are here." Emma called Bishop. "You have Wayne. Insurance. Bring the documents. Your uncle goes free." She looked at the briefcase beside her. The originals Dad had hidden for 20 years. The evidence that could destroy Morrison's entire network. Or she could turn around, save Wayne, let Morrison's organization survive. Dad had faced the same choice, save himself or save others. Emma knew what he'd choose, what he did choose. She kept driving to Dallas. The federal building's parking garage was almost empty. Bishop waited by a black SUV, 2 other agents with him. Except Emma doubted they were real agents. "The documents," Bishop said. "Wayne first." Bishop nodded to the SUV. They opened the back. Wayne was there, zip-tied, duct tape over his mouth, alive. Emma handed over the briefcase. Bishop opened it, a slow smile spreading across his face as he saw the photos and ledger. "Your father was thorough. He was murdered for that thoroughness. He was murdered because he wouldn't mind his own business." Bishop held up the ledger. "This dies here. Morrison's organization continues. You go home, mourn your losses, and live quietly." "Like I have a choice?" "You do. Die here with your uncle, or live knowing you were smart enough to walk away." Emma looked at Wayne, saw him shake his head slightly. He was telling her to run. But she was Dale Hoffman's daughter. "There's one problem with your plan," she said. Bishop raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "That's not the only copy. Jennifer Palmer Cross stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, followed by real FBI agents, dozens of them, weapons drawn. Special Agent Bishop, one called out, "You're under arrest."
Bishop went for his gun. Bad decision. They dropped him before he cleared the holster. The 2 fake agents surrendered immediately. Wayne was freed, pulling Emma into a hug that bruised her ribs. "You could have run," he said, his voice raw. "Dad wouldn't have. No, he wouldn't." Later at the FBI office, the real office, Emma gave her statement. Jennifer had filed everything with the Austin judge. Arrest warrants were being issued across 3 states. Morrison's network, 2 decades in the making, was crumbling in hours. "Your father would be proud," the lead agent said. Emma thought about that, about pride and ghosts and the weight of truth. "He'd be alive if he'd run," she said. "Maybe, or maybe Morrison would have killed him anyway. Men like that don't leave loose ends." Emma's phone rang. Her mom. "Come home," Linda said. "There's something on the news you need to see." The TV showed Morrison's hospital room. He was dead. Heart attack, they said, but the timing was suspicious. An hour after Bishop's arrest. Someone cleaned up the last loose end. Garrett said Emma didn't care. Morrison was gone. Tony was in federal custody. The network was destroyed. But there was one more thing. That night she drove to the quarry alone, stood where Dad's truck had gone in, where Wayne had shot Morrison, where 20 years of lies had finally ended. She pulled out the photo from Dad's truck, herself at 8, gap-toothed and grinning, protected all those years in the dark. "We did it, Dad," she said to the black water. "We got 'em all." The wind picked up, rippling the surface. For a moment, She thought she heard something. A truck's engine, a CB radio crackling, her father's voice saying her name. But it was just the wind. It was always just the wind.
The funerals came in waves. First, Carl. Despite everything, Dolores insisted on a proper burial. Emma went, standing in the back while Dolores wept over the man who'd murdered his best friend and spent 20 years living with it. Only 6 people showed up. Then Pete Kowalski, who'd lasted 2 more days after the rest stop shooting, long enough to give federal testimony from his hospital bed. His funeral had no one but Emma and Maria, 2 women honoring a killer who'd tried to make it right at the end. Morrison didn't get a funeral. His family had him cremated quietly, his empire collapsing as federal agents froze every account, seized every property. The town watched as Morrison Transport was padlocked. Morrison Development shuttered. 40 years of corruption ending in yellow tape and federal seizures. Emma was packing up her apartment. Couldn't stay here anymore. Too many ghosts. When someone knocked. She opened the door to find a young woman, maybe 25, holding a baby. "You're Emma Hoffman?" "Yes." "I'm Christina Hutchkins. Ben Hutchkins was my grandfather."
Ben Hutchkins, the first trucker Morrison and Tony had killed back in 1985. "He died before I was born," Christina continued, her voice soft but steady. "But my grandmother never believed it was a heart attack. She kept his things, hoping someday." She shifted the baby to her other hip. "The FBI came yesterday, said you found evidence about what really happened. Your grandfather refused to carry drugs. They killed him for it." Christina nodded, tears starting. "Grandma died last year still believing he was murdered but never able to prove it. She would have been so grateful." The baby fussed. She bounced him gently. "That's my son," she said. "Benjamin, named after Grandpa." Emma looked at the baby. 6 months, maybe, grabbing at his mother's hair. A generation that would never know the fear Morrison had spread through this town. "Your grandfather was brave," Emma said. "He said no when it would have been easier to say yes. Like your father. Like my father." After Christina left, Emma drove to the cemetery. Dad's stone had fresh flowers. Mom came every day now. But there was someone else there. Jennifer Palmer. Cross. Standing at another grave. Louise Palmer. 1959 to 1991. 20 years I've come here," Jennifer said, her voice quiet. 20 years of telling her I'd get justice. Today, I finally can say I did. She turned. "The FBI wants me to head the task force, cleaning up what's left of Morrison's network. 3 states, hundreds of charges. You'll be good at it. They want you too, as a consultant. You know the trucking industry, the families affected." Emma looked at her stomach, still flat but not long. "I have other plans." Jennifer noticed the gesture, understood. "When?" "May." "Spring baby. Your dad would have loved being a grandfather." They stood together in the November cold. 2 daughters of murdered parents, survivors of a war they hadn't chosen. Emma's phone buzzed. Wayne texting from the hospital, where he was getting his final checkup. "Tyler's here. Wants to talk to you." She found them in the cafeteria. Tyler looked older than his 20 years, marked by his kidnapping, but his eyes were clear. "I want to help," he said, his voice firm. "With the FBI, with making sure this never happens again. It's dangerous. So was doing nothing. Grandpa Dale knew that." Grandpa Dale. Tyler had been born 2 years after Dad died, had never met him, but the family stories had made Dale Hoffman a legend. The trucker who wouldn't run, who died rather than abandon his family. He wasn't a hero, Emma said. He was just a man who made a choice. Sometimes that's the same thing. Wayne gripped his son's shoulder. Your dad would be proud, Emma, of all of this.
That night, cleaning out the last of her apartment, Emma found the cassette player she'd bought to play Dad's tapes. There was one tape left she hadn't played, unlabeled, found in the bottom of the evidence box. She hit play, expected more evidence. Instead, Dad's voice filled the room, singing an old country song he used to sing on long drives. She remembered being tiny, sitting in his truck's passenger seat, listening to him harmonize with the radio. Then her own voice, young and high. "Daddy, sing the star song." "More than all the stars in Texas, that's how much I love you." A recording from a normal day. Before Morrison, before Tony, before November 8th, 1992. Just a father and daughter singing in a truck, believing they had forever. Emma cried then, really cried. For the first time since they'd found the truck. 20 years of suppressed grief pouring out for the father she'd lost. For the years stolen. For the little girl who'd grown up thinking she'd been abandoned.
A knock at the door. Her mother, carrying boxes. "Thought you could use help," Linda said, then saw Emma's face, heard the tape. "Oh, honey." They sat together, listening to Dale Hoffman sing to his daughter, both of them knowing how the story ended, but treasuring this moment when it hadn't ended yet. "I remember that day," Linda said. "You'd both gone to pick up parts in Houston. Came back with that tape. So proud you'd recorded Daddy singing. I forgot we had it. You were so young, but you loved those truck rides." The tape ended. Emma rewound it, played it again. Her father's voice, preserved in magnetic ribbon, more valuable than all the insurance money in the world. "Where will you go?" Linda asked. "Austin, maybe somewhere new." Emma touched her stomach. "Somewhere this baby can grow up without everyone knowing the story. They'll know eventually, when they're ready, when they can understand that their grandfather was complicated, that he made mistakes but tried to fix them, that he died for something that mattered." Linda helped her pack the last boxes. In one, Emma placed everything. Dad's logbooks, the photos from his truck, the cassette tapes, evidence of a life cut short but not wasted.
The next morning, Emma stood in the empty apartment one last time. Through the window, she could see Morrison Transport. Federal agents still cataloging evidence. The quarry had been drained completely. Now, 3 more vehicles found. 3 more families getting closure. Her phone rang. Sheriff Garrett. "Thought you should know. Tony Castellano made a deal. Full confession in exchange for life without parole instead of the death penalty. He admitted ordering Dad's murder, everything. Your father, the others, the drug running. He's giving up names across 3 states. Garrett paused. He said something else. Said Dale was the only one who ever stood up to them without fear. Said he respected that, even as he ordered Carl to kill him. Respect didn't stop him. No, but it made him remember. For 20 years, Tony remembered your father's name. That's something." Emma didn't think it was much of something, but she understood. In their twisted world, Morrison and Tony had seen Dad as an equal, an opponent worth removing, not just another trucker to be crushed.
She drove through town one last time, past the hardware store where she'd worked, past Twin Pines Trucking's old lot, now a medical plaza, past the Texaco where Dad had bought his last coffee. At the city limits, she stopped, looked back at the town that had shaped her, broken her, remade her. The town where her father had died rather than run. Then she drove forward, toward Austin, toward the future.
In the passenger seat, the ultrasound photo and Dad's picture side by side. Past and future, loss and hope. Miles later, she passed a Peterbilt on the highway. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache like Dad's, gave her a wave. Truckers always waved. Dad had taught her that. A brotherhood of the road, he'd called it. She waved back, then noticed the small photo taped to her dashboard. Emma at 8, the one from Dad's truck. She'd put it there without thinking, carrying forward his tradition. Her phone rang through the speakers. Jennifer Palmer Cross. We found something else in Morrison's files. A life insurance policy on your father he'd taken out. Never claimed because it would have raised questions. It's yours legally. $800,000. Emma laughed. Actually laughed. He insured the man he was planning to kill? Morrison insured everyone useful in case of accidents. Give it to the other families, Emma said. The Hutchkins, the Garretts, the others. All of it. I have what I need.
She did. The small inheritance Dad had hidden, the truth finally revealed, the baby growing inside her. The knowledge that Dale Hoffman had been exactly who she'd always believed he was, a good man, who'd faced an impossible choice and chosen his family over his life. The highway stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility. Somewhere behind her, they were still pulling bodies from quarries, still arresting Morrison's network, still untangling 20 years of lies. But Emma was done looking back. She turned on the radio. Country music, something modern she didn't recognize. But then the old song came on, the one Dad used to sing. She found herself harmonizing, remembering the words, feeling him there in the cab with her. More than all the stars in Texas. The baby kicked for the first time, a tiny flutter, barely noticeable. But Emma felt it. Life asserting itself, the future demanding attention. She sang louder. Windows down, Texas wind whipping her hair. Dale Hoffman's daughter carrying Dale Hoffman's grandchild. Driving toward whatever came next. Not running from anything, just moving forward the way truckers do. Mile by mile, load by load, song by song. In her rearview mirror, the town disappeared. But Dad's voice stayed with her, preserved in tape and memory and DNA. A ghost, maybe, but a welcome one. The kind that helps you find your way home even when home is somewhere you've never been. She drove on, chasing daylight, carried by 18 wheels worth of dreams. The road went on forever, just the way Dad would have wanted it.
Thanks for watching. We'll uncover the next mystery together in the next Vanished Story.